Good morning, everybody. Today, let us discuss the Marxist criticism, which is prescribed to you in your Unit 3. Marxism exactly means the philosophy that is presented by Karl Marx and Engels. The materialist philosophy based on the works of Marx and Engels is what is called as Marxism. Marx drew on Hegel's philosophy of the 18th century, the political economy of Adam Smith and Ricardo, the 19th century French socialism, in order to develop a scientific and revolutionary critique of society, which found its most systematic and dynamic expression in his book titled as Das Kapital, that is published in 1867. Marx and Engels called their economic theories as communism and announced the advent of communism in their jointly written Communist Manifesto published in 1848. They both were influenced by the Frankfurt School presented by Horkheimer, Adorno, and Habermas. And the Communist Manifesto aims to bring about a classless society based on the common ownership of the means of production, distribution, and exchange. The main terms that are used in Marxism are means of production, number one. The means of production is the combination of the means of labor and the subject of labor. Means of labor include machines, tools, equipment, infrastructure, and so on. While the subject of labor includes raw materials and materials directly taken from nature. Means of production by themselves produce nothing. Labor power is needed for production to take place. Yes or no? The second important term in Marxism is mode of production. The mode of production is a combination of productive forces, including the means of production and labor power, and social and technical relations of production, which includes the property, power and control relations governing society's productive assets, cooperative work relations, relations between people and the objects of their work, and relations between the social classes. So, means of production, along with the mode of production, forms the base of Marxism. We also find a word called base and superstructure in Marxism. The base structure metaphor relates the idea that the economic relations between people with regard to the means of production forms the basis for a superstructure of ideas, social, religious, and political institutions and legal frameworks that is ultimately determined by the bias. For Marx, the base structure determines the earlier structure or the superstructure. It is the base structure which is important, based upon which you have the superstructure superimposed on that. Through this relationship is not in one-way process, but it definitely has a correlation. The relationship between superstructure and base is a dialectal one for Marx. Marx also talks about the class consciousness. Class consciousness refers to the self-awareness of a social class, whether he or she belongs to the upper class, middle class, lower class, and his thoughts, his ideology, everything will act accordingly. So, class consciousness refers to the self-awareness of a social class and its capacity to act in its own rational interests. This is a very good example of base and superstructure that you have on the picture. You have the lower part, the extreme base, which is the base structure, where the working class is situated. On the working class, the little middle class is situated. On the middle class, the upper class is situated. On the upper class, the kings, the feudal lords are situated. On the feudal lords, you have the kings. And ultimately, it is the money that decides the whole thing. Whoever has the money is the king, under whom the feudal lords will work, under whom the middle class will work, under whom the working class will work, and under whom the workers are situated. So ultimately, who rules the entire society is the money people, the people with money. So the people with money will become the top structure, whereas the base structure is the working class always. So the top structure enjoys the life, whereas the base structure or maybe the working class always works. So the base and superstructures that are given to us by Marx and Engels is the working class on the base, the educated workers on top, and the ruling class on the extreme end. Now, this has only three tiers. So, you have the upper class, middle class, and lower class. In many of the social structures, you can have many other divisions also, as you could see in the diagram left. Marxism also talks about the ideology. Ideology is a set of conventions, a set of beliefs. Now, this belief system is definitely associated with the people with money. Because the ruling class controls the entire society's means of production, the superstructure of the society, including its ideology, will be determined according to what is in the ruling class's best interests, naturally. Therefore, the ideology of a society is of enormous importance since it confuses the alienated groups and can create false consciousness such as commodity fetishism. Commodities define the social relationships. So, what your social relationship is or what your social class is depends upon what you have. Whether house is there, whether vehicle is there, two-wheeler or a four-wheeler, and what exactly your house is full of with all the material comforts, that will decide your social class. And your ideology also depends upon all these material things that you have. Another interesting phenomena that Marx talks about is alienation. Marx refers to the alienation of people from aspects of their human nature. Alienation describes objective features of a person's situation in capitalism. It isn't necessary for them to believe or feel that they are alienated. He believes that alienation is a systematic result of capitalism. All the people with money on the one side and the working class on the other side. Automatically, the groups are alienated. The ideologies are different. The superstructure is different. The base structure is separated. Accordingly, they'll have a class consciousness because they are separated with base and superstructure. And we also talks about the means of production and the mode of production, which give rise to base structure and superstructure, as a result of which the class consciousness is produced, which will have different ideology and automatically every class is alienated from each other. This is what exactly our society is in which we live, that Marxism talks of. Marx describes several social classes in capitalist societies, including the proletariat and the bourgeois. The proletariat is the working class. Those individuals who sell their labor power is called as the proletariat, and who in the capitalist mode of production do not own the means of production are the working class. According to Marx, the capitalist mode of production establishes the conditions that enable the bourgeois to exploit the proletariat due to the fact that the worker's labor power generates an added value greater than the worker's salary. This is related to the labor theory of value that is presented by the classical economists like Adam Smith and David Ricardo. The next class that Marx talks about is the bourgeois class. The bourgeois class is the middle class. Those who own the means of production and buy labor power from the proletariat are called as the bourgeois, who are recompensed by a salary, thus exploiting the proletariat. The upper class never comes into the picture at all of the base and the superstructure. It is always the proletariat class and the bourgeois class that come into the picture. The bourgeois will be dominating the proletariat under the saying of the upper class. So Marx has got the philosophical political motto, the philosophers have only interpreted the world in various ways, says Marx. The point is to change it. And the question is how to change it. In order to change or understand society, we have to see human beings as part of the material world. Materialism, remember, does not depend on God or spirituality. All those things that you can buy with money will make you material. And in this material world, Marx opines that there are only three classes. The upper class that never comes into the picture but is a capitalist. The middle class or the bourgeois class that controls the working class under the saying of the upper class, and the lower class or the proletariat class that works entirely in toto, producing various things but not enjoying the fruits of it. The history of all societies has been the history of struggle for power between different classes, the bourgeois class, the proletariat class, and the upper class. And literature also is seen as a part of the superstructure and ideology that the society has. The role of ideology in Marxist terms is to provide the legitimization of the power of the ruling class, not merely a reflection of historical processes, but a specific and highly codified social practice with its own conditions of material production and reception, its own conventions, devices, and its own history. Marxist literary criticism has social class and its prevailing ideology with its outlook, values, assumptions, and half realized allegiances. They have a major bearing on what is written by the members of that class. Writers are formed by their social contexts. Both the content and form of literature have political overtones, is the influence of Marxism towards literature. There are two main streams of Marxism. One is George Steiner, who talks about the Leninist Marxism of the 1930s. Lenin has the need for art to be explicitly committed to the political cause of the Social Democratic Party, sometimes called reflective or vulgar Marxism because the literary text is seen as directly reflecting the socio-economic forces working in the society. It is inspired primarily by the works of Maxim Gorky in Russia, but is condemned the artistic and self-expression, and especially avant-garde modernism as bourgeois and decadent. The Leninist Marxism of 1930s imposed socialist realism. Official Soviet standard for art has been given by Stalin till 1990s. Those who deviated were severely punished. Many artists went into exile like the Odessa group. Optimistic picture of the socialist reality and of the development of communist revolution has been emphasized and forced by the Leninist Marxism, and all those who don't agree to them are ostracized or killed. The purpose of education is in the spirit of socialism and a strict adherence to party doctrine and to conventional techniques of realism. They imposed on artists the duty to create optimistic uplifting by didactic works of art that nurture political awareness. As you could see here, the female worker being presented in the picture. Stalin as an organizer of October Revolution and evolving as a hero to help out the working class. He is Vladimir Lenin, who was the predecessor of Stalin in Russia. The second type of Marxism is called as Angelician Marxism, which starts from 1930s till date. It stresses the necessary freedom of the art from direct political determinism of Leninist Marxism, and it flourishes either in exile or in suppressed form. Although not strictly Marxist in spirit, Russian formalists can be included in this category of Angelician Marxism. The ideas included the need for a close formal analysis of literature, the belief that language of literature has its own characteristic procedures and effects constitutes the Angelician Marxism. The major writers under the Marxist notion are Theodor Adorno, Herbert Marcuse, Walter Benjamin, who were interested in developing the critical perspectives of the analysis and discussion of all social phenomena in the society. They also has employed ideology as distortion of reality, whose purpose is to legitimately camouflage unequal power relationships in the society. They argued that society was more complex than could be fathomed by the analysis based only on the political economy. The major critics under Marxism are George Lukács. Most widely influenced of the Marxist critics, George Lukács is. He represents the flexible view of the role of ideology and proposed that each great work of literature creates its own world, which is unique and seemingly distant from the everyday reality. So you have two types of reality according to George Lukács. One is a socialist reality that we see in the society, and the other is a critical reality that we see in literature. He criticizes modernist literature for its excessive concern with style and technique, for its negation of outward reality and dissolution of personality. Another major critic under Marxism is Louis Althusser. Althusser is the critic who has introduced a term called ideology. Ideology is more than a set of ideas. It is more than a set of beliefs. It is more than a way of being. When we live completely within an ideology and we can hardly do otherwise, the ideology creates our lives. It creates our sense of identity. It creates us. We don't create ideology, as Althusser says, but ideology creates us. We are apparently free agents, yet we are trapped in ideologies through which we see and make sense of the world. Pierre Machery is the third Marxist critic who stresses that literary text not only distances itself from its ideology but also exposes its contradictions that are inherent in that ideology. Raymond Williams, a very recent Marxist critic, has produced a beautiful work called Culture and Society and the Long Revolution. He explores the social history of ideas, which constantly emphasizes the interaction between the social and the intellectual, between life of human communities and the life of intellectual traditions. He elaborates the theory of cultural materialism. A culture and its literary products are always conditioned by real material forces, and relations of production in a historical era definitely emphasizes the culture of the person belonging to the nation. If you look at an overview of the Marxist critics, they offer political extension of psychoanalytical terms like the unconscious and the repression. And they believe that literature tries to repress the historical truth, but an analysis can reveal its underlying ideology, that is, its unconscious. Though Marxist politics is an crisis and post-Soviet world, Marxist criticism remains a force in the critical theory and practice even today. Slightly, let us look at each ism that is associated with Marxism, because Marxism begins with socialism, which is a range of economic and social systems characterized by social ownership and democratic control of the means of production in the society. Socialism also is the political ideologies, theories, and movements that aim to establish them. Social ownership may refer to forms of public, collective, or cooperative ownership, to citizen ownership of equity, or to any combination of these. Amul India in Gujarat is a typical example of socialist society. The next ism that becomes a base to Marxism is communism. Communism is a word that is taken from Latin communis, which means communal or common or universal. Communism is a philosophical, social, and political, along with economic ideology and movement, whose ultimate goal is the establishment of the communist society, which is a socio-economic order structured upon two things. Number one, the common ownership of the means of production, and number two, the absence of social classes, money, and the state. And based upon socialism and communism, we have Marxism, developed by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, that has been the foremost ideology of the communist movement. Marxism considered itself to be the embodiment of scientific socialism, rather than model of an ideal society based on the intellectual's design. It is a non-idealist attempt at the understanding of society and history through an analysis based on the real life existing in the society. Associated with Marxism, as it opposes, is capitalism. Capitalism is the product of industrial revolution in the West. Before capitalism, certain working classes had ownership of instruments utilized in production. But because machinery was much more efficient, this property has become worthless, and the mass majority of the workers could only survive by selling their labor, working through making use of someone else's machinery and therefore making someone else profit. Thus, with capitalism, the world was divided into two major classes: the proletariat class or the working class, and the bourgeois class, or maybe the middle class. Maoism is normally an ism that is associated with Marxism, that is put forwarded by Mao Zedong. Maoism is a political theory derived from the teachings of the Chinese political leader Mao Zedong, belonging to 1893 and 1976. Its followers are called as Maoists. Developed in the 1950s until the Deng Xiaoping reforms in the 1970s, it was widely applied as the guiding political and military ideology of the Communist Party of China, CPC. The essential difference between Maoism and other forms of Marxism is that Mao claimed that peasants should be the essential revolutionary class in China because, contrary to their industrial working comrades, they were more suited to establish a successful revolution and socialist society in China. When we look at the communism and Marxism in India, the Communist Party of India is a Maoist insurgent communist party in India which aims to overthrow the government of India through people's war. It was founded on 21st September 2004 through the merger of the Communist Party of India, Marxist-Leninist notions के साथ, with the People's War Group and the Maoist Communist Center of India. The merger was announced on 14th October in the same year, that is 2004. In the merger, a provisional central committee was constituted with the erstwhile People's War Group leader Muppala Lakshman Rao alias Ganapati as General Secretary. Further, on May 8, 2014, the Communist Party of India, which is Marxist-Leninist, and the Naxalbari merged as the CPI, which is Maoist. The CPI, Communist Party of India, which is essentially Maoist, are often referred to as the Naxalites in reference to the Naxalbari insurrection conducted by the radical Maoists in the West Bengal in 1967. CPI Maoist is designated as the terror organization in India under the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. In 2006, the Prime Minister of India, Manmohan Singh, referred to the Naxalites as the single biggest internal security challenge for India and said that the deprived and alienated sections of the population forms the backbone of the Maoist movement in India. The government officials have declared that in 2013, 76 districts of the country were affected by the left-wing extremism, with another 106 districts in ideological influence. If we look at the Marxism seems progress as coming about through the struggle for power between different classes. The view of history as a social class struggle is motored by the competition for economic, social, and political advantage. The simple Marxist model of society is formed by the base structure and superstructure, as we saw, and the Marxist literary criticism asserts the writer's social class. And that's why you could find the writer's social class and its prevailing ideology have a major bearing on what has been written as the member of the class. Marxists see the authors in their social context. It's not the consciousness of men that determines their being, but their social being that determines their consciousness, according to Karl Marx. Marxist literature believes that literature is a product of superstructure and is continually modified by the changes of the base structure, and hence literature is dependent on the material activities of men, and hence it is not divine gift or the imitation of reality, as Aristotle says, or maybe Plato says. Literature is the product of labor, and hence it becomes the organ of labor as well as the product of labor. The changes in the content and form of literature are brought about by the changes in the material base. And Marxist theory believes that there are three historical phases in human development: the slave phase, the feudal phase, and the capitalist phase. Louis Althusser, the French Marxist critic, actually has brought about the notions of ideology and hegemony. Hegemony is the domination. Who dominates who? And so, economic structure of the society is very important aspect of Marxism, and literature is seen as its product. The Marxism believes a social movement. It advocates the relation between society and literature, number one. Number two, economic structures of the society. Number three, the idea of class struggle. And number four, religion as opium to quieten the society of the class domination. Marxist critics keep in mind the issues of class, power, money, and such questions of hegemony. Number one, what role does class play in the work of art? Number two, what is the author's analysis of class relations in the society? Number three, how do characters in the text overcome the oppression? And number four, is there a social conflict in the text that is under observation? Marxist literary criticism asserts that a writer's social class and prevailing ideology have a major bearing on what is written by the member of that class. Marxist critics see all the authors in their respective social contexts. Thank you very much for being a part of this video. Bye for now.